Hello everyone, welcome to my video on investment appraisal, my first video on investment appraisal. This is a part of the course that many people do seem to find complicated, and so my goal is to hopefully kind of take you through it so that it's kind of less complicated and intimidating. So what investment appraisal is it's a means of quantitative decision making for investments. So a business can compare different possible investments by using investment appraisal techniques so that they can see what some of the pros and the cons of each different investment option in front of them is, and to enable them to make a decision. There are three types of investment appraisal. First of all, there is the payback period. That's probably the most straightforward of these. It's basically how long it will take for an investment to pay itself off. So let's say if an investment is £1,000 and it's going to pay off £100 a year, it's going to take you 10 years to pay itself back. So that would be payback period. It does get a little bit more complicated than that, but I'll talk about that in another video. Also, the average rate of return. So this is what percentage of a return an investment is making per year. So, for example, if you made a £100 investment and you had a 5% average rate of return, you know you'd be making £5 per year, and you can compare that to other possible investment projects and things like that. We also have our net present value, which is taking into account the future real-time value of money. Now, what this means is that money in the bank generates an interest rate, and therefore any money put into an investment project has an opportunity cost of not earning that interest rate. And for that reason, the value of money over time falls. So £100 in a couple of years' time will be worth less, or you can buy less with £100 than you can today. Very similar to inflation. It takes into account the time value of money and the opportunity cost of the interest rate. And money in the future has less value than it does today. There are some positive and negative points which can be applied to all the investment appraisal methods. So I'm going to just take a moment to talk you through these. There are some pros and cons for the individual types of investment appraisal as well, but I shall talk about those in separate videos. Okay, first of all, investment appraisal allows managers to compare options with numerical data. Now, if you've got figures, again, you can have a very obvious answer as to which is more effective. So it takes the feelings and emotions of managers out of the equation, as it were. So we can make direct comparisons. How long are these investments going to take to pay themselves back and things like that. Evidence can be used to justify expenditure. Now, what we mean by that is, ultimately, if a manager has made a large investment and it's not paid off, they're going to have to go in front of the board of directors, and and those board of directors are going to say, "Why did you make that investment? It's not paid off." Now, if the manager can put it in front of them and say, "This was our investment appraisal. We think at the time it looked like a good investment, and unfortunately it hasn't paid off," then it's going to sound a lot more. They're going to be able to justify their position, potentially keep their job more effectively than if they just went there and said, "I had a hunch. It seemed like a good idea at the time." So it allows, it helps them to justify a purchase, either going forward in the future or retrospectively if things go wrong, if they're being held to account by business directors. And it also forces managers to plan expenditure carefully. So it gives them something to consider when making those decisions. However, there are some downsides to the investment appraisal. It's not an all-inclusive method for making decisions. There are other factors that they do not consider. So some examples of those would be the fact that it's based on predicted future cash flows that may be inaccurate. So we might think that we're going to sell a lot of ice creams in the summer. If it rains, that's not necessarily going to be the case. our future cash flows are not certain. You know, don't count your chickens before they've hatched, as it were. So yeah, certainly that might not be, that kind of takes away from the effectiveness of the investment appraisal. Furthermore, market conditions may change. So imagine if you put in a big investment to make a load of fidget spinners. Yeah, the year is 2018. I think fidget spinners were very much last year. I can't imagine too many people are selling too many fidget spinners these days. Market conditions can dramatically change, which is going to completely floor any sort of statistics that the investment appraisal has put out. They also ignore qualitative data such as stakeholder views and objectives. So it's not going to consider the the ethical implications of an investment. That won't be taken into account by the investment appraisal. It purely looks at cash flow and numerical factors. And also, with having to calculate those cash flows, those future cash flows, there may be a lot of resources involved, a lot of market research and things like that. A smaller business may not have the resources in order to consider that. So it's possible that some of the factors of the investment appraisal might not be affordable or available to all businesses. So that's something to consider when you're perhaps with your evaluation. Is it something that this business can afford, as good as an investment appraisal might be? Anyway, so I'm going to create some videos looking at perhaps each one of these individually, how you might look at them numerically and how you might calculate the figures, and also look at some of the pros and the cons of those individually. So yeah, see you next time.